Hi guys, lovely chatting to you. I love the film. So I guess firstly I'll go to Damian Aislinn just to find out about where the idea for the film came from. Damian, it's obviously your first feature film. While Aislinn, you've written and directed The Devil's Doorway and a number of other shorts. So I guess firstly, what brought you guys together to make this film?
Uh,
Uh,
sorry, Damian. Do you want to answer that?
well, Aislinn and I have a mutual friend, Ryan Kernigan, who shot the film that you mentioned of Aislinn's. And I was working with Ryan, and that I'd mentioned to him that I was hoping to, direct my first feature film, or I was hoping to put a feature film together. And Ryan had suggested that maybe Aislinn and I would share some films, in common that we enjoyed and that would work well together. So he put the two of us in contact, and the two of us sat down for a cup of coffee and, kind of chatted about what types of films we liked and what directors we liked and what settings we might like. And sort of Doineann came out of that, really, didn't it, Ashley?
Yeah, that's pretty much what happened. I remember when we had that first meeting, you told me an anecdote about a guy who'd built a house on an island, and then when he went back to his, do you remember this story?
Mm-hmm.
Back to his holiday home, it was completely gone, and all the locals were saying, "What are you talking about? There was no house here." Do you remember that? That
Yeah,
was the
yeah.
first conversation that we had, which brought us into the territory of kind of the initial mystery of these people were here and now they're gone and nobody seems to know where they are. It sort of started from that initial conversation. Ryan brought us together.
And can you tell me, Aislinn, just a little bit about the writing process after you guys sort of had those discussions? What exactly, like, what was the where did you go to with the script?
I think we had a few meetings like that where we just talked generally about the kind of films that we liked, and it could have went in a lot of different directions. Even I think there was a discussion at one point briefly about a period kind of idea, and we narrowed it down kind of between us over a series of meetings, and then I just went off to kind of figure out what would this be, what would this story be, and I pitched what it became Doineann to Damian at some point. I think I probably sent you a short written version, Damian. At first,
Yeah.
like a couple of paragraphs. This is the sort of setup, and that just clicked with Damian, and we took it from there. So a lot of it was me by myself, just writing away. But there was also obviously like development meetings with Damian and Dermot, and that's the process. But yeah, a lot of time by yourself, just plugging away and trying to make it work.
Yeah, and it's Damien. It's always very refreshing to see an Irish language genre film. We've had a couple like Unbruntness and more recently Arupt that have genre elements, but often we see it's more a historical or drama territory that they tend to be in. So was it always intended for this story to be Oscuelga?
Well, yes, it was. Yeah, when the story was written, it was sort of for a scheme that was coming up. In Northern Ireland Screen, there's the Irish Language Broadcast Fund here, and they had a scheme going called Gallen, which is in collaboration with TG Ceathair and BBC Gaeilge. And they'd put a call out for ideas with a specific budget and specific types of stories in mind. And I can't remember which order it came in, but the film was sort of basically for that. It was for that scheme. But I think one of the reasons that our friend Ram put us together was that notion of genre. We're both big fans of genre film, whether that's thriller or horror films. And to me, certainly, it was important that that in the Irish language, that type of film is being made. And I often think of the difference, say, between the word movie and film. And I really wanted to make a movie, something that someone would be entertained by and would maybe go to the cinema and watch. And from Aislinn's talking there about, she sent me a first couple of paragraphs. There was a few things straight away that stood out. One of them was the simplicity of the idea. A guy comes back to an island and his wife and child are missing. He has to work with this retired cop on the island to find her. It's a nice, simple idea. And then obviously Aislinn built in all the twists and turns with it. And then the other thing that I remember stood out from the very, very start was this notion of a scene played out twice from two different viewpoints, which I thought was really interesting. I have seen it done, obviously, films like Rashomon do it. But I thought in this story with these characters, I thought it was a really, really interesting way of doing it.
I think it was important, just to kind of bounce off of that, to both of us from the beginning, given that it was going to be an Irish language film, and that's what we were creating together, that it would be a film that was for anybody. I think there's been, in the past, people have made Irish language films for people who have a specific interest in Irish culture and history, whereas there's no reason they can't just be mass market films for anybody to watch. And in recent years, audiences have got really used to and have expressed that they're happy to read subtitles, that they're happy to engage with. And in fact, in many cases, particularly with genre, are really keen to get an eye into a different world that they don't normally see. So this is what we wanted to bring with this film, was a genre film for absolutely anybody to watch that happens to be in Irish.
Yeah, it was great. I think you guys definitely achieved that. I know I was just speaking to you there before we got on that, whenever I was watching it, I had to remind myself that it was actually Oscuelga, because it felt like it just had such a European genre feel to it, which was incredible. I mean, obviously the reference to Another Round being like, it just felt like it was in the same vein as something like that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, I mean, that's always the intention. That's always the hope, that it's kind of set alongside some other films of the same genre, thrillers and things like that. So I from my own point of view as well, it's the same as what I'm saying about the writing with Aislinn. Like, for we were making the film to keep it simple, like a good solid thriller is something that people enjoy, and to keep it almost as as straightforward and simple in terms of the making of it as possible.
Yeah. And just to go to you, Dermot, was that something that drew you into it? You obviously are the producer on this project. Can you tell me a little bit about how you got involved and how you were attracted to it?
Well, we, obviously we'd seen Aislinn's brilliant film, The Devil's Doorway, which, I mean, you talk about the beautiful thing it is that, what we don't notice is that this was made during a pandemic. What we don't notice is that this was an extremely low budget film. And what we don't notice is that it was, in the Irish language, that it holds and compels despite all those things. Not that I think that in the Irish language is, but as you rightly kind of characterize it as sort of in the character of a European style film. So it's just great, that we could get the opportunity to make a film like that. And I knew that Aislinn had made Devil's Doorway, which is just a beautiful film. And I knew that when Damian and Aislinn got together, and we set our stall out, we could make something. We could make something special, because, as it turns out, we were going to have some great actors to kind of help with that process, because this is a modest film, but the things that make it, such a good film are the performances, the writing, and the direction. No special effects, no car chases, a little bit of VFX, but everything else is about the modesty of the film and just working well within those constraints. And we're really happy that we managed to do that.
Yeah, and just to bring the actors into the discussion, obviously, Peter, coming to you first. Like, over the course of the film, we see your character Tomas transforming from what we believe is one sort of character into another when more information comes to light over the course of the film. Was the complexity of that character and the writing, and whenever you read the script, was that something that attracted you to the role?
Yeah, absolutely. The minute I read the script initially, it was like something I had never read before, and certainly in an Irish context, and it just blew me away. I mean, I thought it had elements of, Coen brother-esque storyline going on there, and the relationship between Tomas and Leisha was very interesting, and there was so much in it, and Damian was so passionate about it, and we talked at length for months before we shot about the character and how to do it. So yeah, there was so much in there to work with, and such a challenge. So yeah, it was an incredible script, and proud of how it turned out. But working with Clare and Brid, of course, and Sean and Damian and everyone, it was a pleasure. It was a very collaborative experience.
I think by the time we got to turn cameras over, it felt almost like the culture of a rep theater or something, because as it turns out, the early stages of the pandemic, we had to stall the filming by something like 6 or 7 months. That gave an opportunity for Damian to work really well with the cast, with Brid, with Peter, with Clare, and with Sean, the key cast, to really nail the characters. So by the time we got to roll the cameras, we were sort of ready, and then we had another shutdown. So we were even more ready. We used the pandemic to our advantage. So it sort of felt, what it's like. Low budget films. You've got a very tight schedule. You've got to get through that material in a very efficient way. But those people were those characters already. We hadn't defined those characters, on the shoot, which was brilliant.
Yeah, and just going to you next, Brid. I was shocked to find that you're not a regular Irish speaker. Oh, sorry. I think you're muted there.
Yes, that was the mountain I had to climb. When Michael Hewitt, Dermot's partner in double band, phoned and asked me, did I have any Irish? I had to tell him I had virtually none. I had some when I was at school, but there was very little left. But then when I was sent the script, and of course I was sent the script in English, I just thought, well, I have to find a way of doing this. And initially, when I first spoke to Damian, I thought they'd got the wrong person. I mean, I did think I was not the person they were thinking, or Damian was thinking of, because I had so little Irish. But I had enormous amount of help, and wonderful help. I worked with Damian on it, and had a coach, Orlany Harney, then when it came to filming. But then I had 3 fantastic fellow actors who really supported me. And was in that situation where I had so little Irish and they were Irish speakers, it could have been quite daunting, but I had an enormous amount of help. But it was a project I just could not resist, because it was such a great script and great character. Yeah,
I can imagine so. Like Alicia, the character Alicia is so fascinating.
Yes, it was like a dream character, really, especially, I mean, she's a mystery woman in so many ways, but I must say I'm very drawn to mysterious people, and filling in the sort of the gaps is also a really enjoyable thing in working in a film like this, on a script like this. There aren't a huge amount of details, but that again is intriguing and ultimately very satisfying, because there aren't too many details to muddy the water. So you filling in makes it sort of very fulfilling and exciting to play.
Yeah. And then Clare, just coming to you next, like you're a fairly strong Irish speaker, I believe. What was the character Siobhan, were you also very captivated by her reading the script?
Yeah, I absolutely was. It's funny, like you read lots of scripts as actors, and often when you're a woman of a certain age, you're reading a lot of the same kind of characters, where the wife is maybe not, a very much a supporting role to the husband, but reading this script and getting through all the twists and turns, it was so exciting to read a character like Siobhan and to get the chance to play her. There's far more to her than like initially meets the eye, which is really enjoyable, and getting to work with Damian and the rest of the cast was just a pure joy. It's a lovely thing to get to work with actors whose careers you've watched from seeing all of their work before and maybe knowing them in passing, and then getting to work with them and then being as brilliant and talented and lovely as they all are. And I know everyone says that, but we really were a really brilliant team and felt very supported by everyone. And it was slightly traumatic with the whole pandemic shenanigans of shutting down and starting again, but I think that just made us all more determined to do the film justice and to do Aislinn's script justice.
Yeah, I think Siobhan had it. I'm sure it was it was interesting to take on the character in terms of there was a lot of complex emotions to convey, both without speaking and also Oscuelga. So you did an excellent job.
Thank you. It's a lovely thing to get to, as Damian said, you know, to play out the scene in two different ways, and to get into the complexity of how that's going to be perceived. I don't want to give too much away, like how that's going to be perceived by the audience, but it was a really, really brilliant challenge. But never too daunting with the support that we had.
Yeah, I am going to flag to everyone watching at home. It's a slightly difficult film to discuss without giving away what happens. So we'll try and be vague, but
I feel like have I already given it away? I can't remember now. I should keep an eye on that.
Yeah,
I think the cat's out of the bag.
Sorry, guys. Sorry.
No, I don't think it was you. But I assume some people would have seen this already. They're watching it now.
Yeah.
That's true.
Oh yeah, there'll be a mix just for anyone who's not watching. But I guess I think we have to go ahead and discuss it. Yeah, exactly. But I guess I'd like to come to Damian and Aislinn just on the point that Dermot was talking about in terms of, and I think it's been a theme across a lot of productions that I've spoken to who have filmed over or during the course of the pandemic, of making the most of those setbacks. Like they are setbacks, but they can be seen as opportunities as well, to really rehearse and prepare. I believe that there was, did you, Peter? I think, Peter, you got given a book on narcissism. And Brid, you got given a book just to help develop the characters. Can you guys tell me a little bit about the ideas behind giving those little nudges or suggestions to them?
Well, I think it was probably Damian that gave Peter the book on narcissism. Damian, yeah.
Yeah.
I think we discussed a lot. Obviously, I wrote the script before the pandemic, and I had no idea, like any of us had, that there was going to be a pandemic. So the guys and Damian did so much to carry it through under those circumstances. I just think they did an absolutely incredible job. I'm so impressed by what they turned out of it. But when the script was being written, and when in the whole development process, we had a lot of conversations about the psychology of the different characters and why they behaved in the ways that they did and what they were up to. But Damian, you can take it from there.
Yeah, I think with Peter, and obviously I'm probably going to hit spoilers here, so I apologize if anyone hasn't seen it yet. But I guess, again, it was the interesting bit about the character, that it's as much about the subtleties of control and how those, what might look like a normal relationship to everyone else, is kind of built upon these small everyday things that the character does. So me and Peter talked a lot about coercive control, and there were a few books on that. And I think that was again, to go back to that scene played twice, it was an interesting way. He's a duplicitous character, and it was an interesting way that Aislinn had created, whereby you can see both sides of the character effectively. And then with Brid, I think, it was a discussion me and Aislinn had a few times, and Brid just mentioned it there, that in a way it makes sense that Laois's character isn't quite tied down. There is no backstory. And I think at one point, certainly I'd been talking to Aislinn about maybe adding some of that in, and I think Aislinn was right to say that the more mysterious the better there. But certainly myself and Brid spoke about maybe the culture of the Garda in the 60s or the 70s, for example, when Laois might have been a very young Garda, and the kind of the environment that the character would have come out of, but then we didn't tie it down to any specific background. So I mean, there were just books to get us started, get us chatting about the character, maybe thinking about it. But as it says, Brid's point about the mystery is actually, for the character, that worked best in the end, because you kind of put your own narrative on top of it.
I think that works really well. And for me, it's like I could write a book on Laois and her whole life before this, and everything that's led her up to this point. But you don't need to have, I think it kind of actually, as the writer, and Brid and I have never sat down and actually talked about it in depth. And I'm sure that as they the actor is the custodian of the character too, in a different way. It's like I hand it off to the director, and then the actor turns the character into who they become on screen. And I'm sure that Brid has a very full sense of who Leisha is. I think you have to in order to really inhabit the character. But what you see on the audience don't need everything, but I think we need to feel like we have everything behind us in order for me to write it, in order for Damian to direct it, in order for Brid then to be able to perform the character fully. But I think it's nice to have that space on screen for the audience to fill in things and not be given absolutely everything.
And guys, do you have anything to add to that, just in terms of approaching these roles after discussing that with them?
Yeah, I just listened to Damian and Aisling there about this character of Leisha. As I said, I felt it was an irresistible script and an irresistible character, and the mystery was there. And Damian sent me a book called A Guarded Life by Magella Moynihan, about a woman who'd been in the Guards in the 70s. She was a vanguarda. And that was a great help, because there's a reason why Leisha's on that island, a blow-in, as she describes herself, and a guard, and had been acting as a guard, and is semi-retired, is waiting for a replacement. And I think what I could take from, or what I could take on board from Magella Moynihan's book, was that it was a possibility that she was sent there as a punishment by her superiors, or she had willingly taken that post there to lick her wounds because she'd been hurt in some way by, or she just wanted away. She wanted away because she felt that it wasn't for her, but she liked that job. So here she was on an island, and all of that was very good nourishment for the character. But also what I loved about this script is she is a character in a landscape, and the landscape's also feeding the story, and as far as I'm concerned, feeds Leisha, this woman who's lived alone in this landscape for years. And it's a great sort of honor in a film to feel you are part of a landscape. And it's one of the great things for me about cinema is, as opposed to being on stage, you can actually exist and inhabit that landscape of a film. And this was a wonderful opportunity, because it's so beautifully shot. And every time you walk onto, there's the scene where I walk across a beach. I'll never forget that morning as long as I live, this early freezing cold morning with the Mourne Mountains of you, and I walk across the beach, and it's that you get that wonderful exhilarating feeling of, I'm in a film, I'm living this film. And there's just so much to feed you. And as Aisling says, you don't need all those details. There's so much else going on, but working with everybody feeds you as well, with the crew and the camera and the great actors and director. It really feeds you.
Yeah, I think Leisha, she's something of a Western sheriff type character, isn't she? That sort of enforces her own brand of justice, I guess, over the course of the film. Was that also? I'd say that was incredibly appealing as well. I believe. Did you say Shanti O'Malley was saying that you were similar to Tommy Lee Jones and No Country for Old Men?
It was in the Q&A after the Galway film Fla. It was a very nice young man who pointed out that I reminded him of Tommy Lee Jones, but then we had this great sequence afterwards where Shanti O'Malley did mock-ups of me with Tommy Lee Jones's face, with the Stetson, which was great fun. It was great fun, because I suppose it does have that element of, but Leisha obviously on that island ends up as more than just a guard. She becomes a judge. She's the only anyone who's associated with the law or representative of the law. And because there is nobody else, she finds herself having to apply what is like island justice. It's the only thing can be described, because it's not influenced by the law beyond that island. Yeah. And I say no more.
And Peter, can you tell me a little bit about approaching your role of Tomas after having those meetings with Damian and stuff?
Yeah, well, I mean, I examined the book chapter by chapter, and the main word we always came upon with the narcissist, yeah, but there's covert aggressives, which is like a person who you don't realize you're in a coercive relationship until the very end, or because people are subtly winning and creating scenarios where it becomes a competition, but they have to win at every point. And it was it's a dark enough character to investigate. But I think when reading it, I think you kind of start to kind of check your own self and look at some of the characteristics of someone. And I think we all kind of look at ourselves sometimes when we're examining other characters, like you come out of knowing that you're a better person than this guy, but it's an interesting thing to do sometimes, to reflect on yourself with attempting to create another character. But I think it's a lot of this, what struck me about this film is that, the preconception, what seems to be, a person with, a pillar of society. He's won awards for his investigative journalism. He creates wonderful TV shows, but he's got it's ego. It's the ego that I was kind of very interested in, and what would drive someone to do such a thing against their family. Like, is it just the love of themselves? It's ego. It's selfishness. And as what Brid said about living the landscape, he creates this landscape to protect himself, his future, and his partner, his wife, is only just a pawn in his game. And I mean, it was an interesting one to investigate. And then, of course, as you have two different sides, so we don't see that at the beginning. We have to create something that is true and real and seems like a comforting kind of person. And so there was so much going on with the character to play, and myself and Damian had a lot to discuss. But I think the most interesting thing is that part of it, that a stalwart of community, for all intents and purposes, seems like a stand-up person. He's a good father. He's well dressed, like looks after himself, and but we're always interested in the darkness that lies beneath the surface in this middle class walk of life. A person who's created a good life for himself, but underneath the surface, the darkness that lies there means that he would do anything to save himself, and that is pure ego. And he brought his wife to this landscape so no one else can come near her. And then suddenly he tries to create a scenario, and suddenly Leisha comes into his world, and she's figuring him out. And I think he starts to see that half true, and then he begins to unravel.
Yeah.
So it was a joy. It was a joy, and it was it's one of the things I'm probably most proud of as a group of actors working with people like that, and seeing it on screen for the first time at the film festival, which isn't something I would do again, because we had to do a Q&A after, and I was kind of gobsmacked, and I was just filled with an incredible amount of pride for everyone involved in the film. So
I think just adding on from that, I think one of the interesting bits for the actors, certainly when I first read it, was that the characters are also acting. So particularly with Clare's character Siobhan, there's acting within the role in itself, but also in Peter's character Tomas, he's acting like a stand-up guy, has to put on this facade. So you've got this weird occasion where the actors are acting someone who's acting at the same time. So and even Brid's character Leisha is, to a certain extent, when she goes into the house with Tomas, is pretending to be a bit silly and a bit naive and a bit unsure, because that's the way that she lures him into it. She's obviously figured out that his ego will be drawn in by that, and then that's where she'll kind of ensnare him. So I often wondered for the actors, would it be interesting to be acting someone that's acting,
Yeah. And well, I guess would any of you guys have an answer to that? How was that experience? They're all three characters anyway that are from you guys here. They're very complex.
Yeah, it's I read the same book that Peter got on Coercive Control, and it was a terrible read, but obviously very beneficial and useful in the lead up to the shoot. But as I think I find with any role that you take on, whether it's on stage or on screen, that's all the homework that you do before, and we'd have that lead up where we got to do all that stuff. And it's a weird thing, once you kind of know your lines, then you want to be filling your brain and filling your body with stuff that will help or whatever. But then on the day, especially with a character like Siobhan, who's going through such a traumatic, I suppose, experience, you have to kind of drop it all then and forget it all to some degree to really, really, really be in that moment. And because, I know we've totally given the game away anyway, so I can say whatever. And because she's coming to a realization, like we are watching, you know, we're always asking, we're telling stories like, why today? Why are we meeting these people today instead of last week or next week? And obviously today is the day where Siobhan realizes all the things in that book. Whereas up until now, she more or less thought she was losing her mind. So while all that stuff is so beneficial, and it kind of seeps into your body, and then on the day you have to just kind of forget it all to some degree, and very, very much be in those moments to try and bring a kind of a sense of reality to them. And because it's so, I'm watching it, then getting to watch it, it is so tense. It's so tense, like, and to be able to create that and to recreate it as well, because obviously on set you do things more than once. So yeah, I think you have to put everything out of your mind and try and be as present in the moment with Peter or with Brid as you can. It's like, you do all the work before, so that on that day you kind of have nothing in your mind but being there in that particular moment.
Yeah. And guys, can you tell me a little bit about the shoot itself? Obviously, I believe you said it was disrupted twice by COVID, was it? How long did you actually shoot? How long were you scheduled to shoot for, or did you shoot for?
We were scheduled to shoot for 18 days, which we did shoot 18 days, but we just did it over a much longer period of time, over the course of 6 weeks or something. So I think we the first time we shut down for 2 weeks, and then we got back on our feet again for 1 day, and then we shut down again. So it was definitely a testing, all right, because we shot it in November as well. So the further we went back, the further we went into December, and shorter days, the sun was setting at 4 o'clock, and you were like, oh God, but as Dermot rightly said earlier, there's the thing, that a low budget film like this doesn't always get, and that's time together, and it's not even necessarily rehearsing, but it's being together and developing a shorthand, developing a confidence in another person, or it just meant that we were on set, we were freer to talk to each other, and less worried about making an idiot of ourselves or whatever, particularly for me as a first-time director. I found that very useful. I come from documentary, so I'd never worked with actors before, so it was just nice getting to know them all, and feeling safe with what they were doing, and being able to discuss things with them openly, and not feel like I'm saying the wrong thing or whatever, so it was that friendly kind of atmosphere that was created outside of the set. Then when we came back to it, actually fed back into the work, I think.
Yeah,
that's absolutely. A bit like when you get to rehearse a play for 4 or 5 weeks, you get the time to create an ensemble, whereas oftentimes if you're doing a shoot, you kind of land on a set on day one and you're creating it as you go, whereas we had this pandemic imposed opportunity to spend an inordinate amount of time together, locked in a hotel, which obviously would have been a nightmare if they were all arseholes, but they're not. They're lovely.
Lovely arseholes.
So it just like Damian said, by the time you get to set, then you're past the point of having to, not that you're not being polite to everybody, but you do have that shorthand and you can just get on with the work, and there's no messing. It was really, if you're gonna look at the bright side of being locked in a hotel with a lot of people, then that's it.
It was an empty hotel as well. I kept thinking, maybe we should get Aislinn on the phone. She could write us something.
Yeah, we could have done The Shining.
Could have done The Shining too or something. It was honestly like that. It was just us in the hotel, so it would have been perfect.
And it was the Stormont Hotel.
Yeah.
So it felt like a metaphor for something else.
And Dermot, can you tell me a little bit just about what were the sort of biggest challenges from a producer's point of view whenever there is these sort of stoppages in planning and a bit of shifting of perspectives, some coming up with problem solving of a new level, I guess?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of producing kind of technical detail in there that we'll never really get to the bottom of my all the producers on the project, Chris Myers and Michael Hewitt, know all about the detail of what happens when you've got a shutdown. 18 days to shoot a feature film is incredibly tight, and you have to kind of budge that based on deals, 6-day weeks and and favors, and once you have shutdowns, and then you're starting to compete with the crew's other commitments, and and it's not so easy to kind of buy your way out of that corner if you're already in a low budget culture, so you're depending on your powers to convince people that we've come so far, we have to finish this thing off, and that was the brilliant thing about the Spirit, that once we got a certain point, and I remember conversations with Peter there, who had been up and down, who had committed himself to a lot, as a Brid, being away from their families in the hotel. That was an early commitment before we even had a shutdown, that and Clare as well. They're just absolutely clear that, we're in this for the long haul, and, we're going to stick it out, So without that kind of monetary kind of, it's more about relationships, buy-in, we would never got it across the line, So that's an important aspect of the whole thing. I mean, the making of the film itself, because it's, as we talked about, set on an island, it is a precinct, so it's actually a small cast, and key and secondary cast, small kind of team to kind of make it, and we were able to keep all them together very successfully. So so that was a great thing, but I don't want to talk too long about the existential challenge that it felt in the middle of it. It felt extremely exercising, and also the difficulty of having to turn up to work every day masked, and all the 30 other people around you also with masks on. That's a sort of a it's only a detail, and all those people who made films during this period should get their own little special medal for because making films is such a collegiate process, and you kind of the social aspect of it is very important, But another barrier goes up, whenever you're halfway not. There are some people, on our crew. I only saw their full faces maybe 15 minutes in the whole month-long production period, which is like, you have to admit that those were bizarre circumstances, So those kind of those psychological dimensions of just keeping all the spirits up, making it feel that we can't, because when the second shutdown came, it felt very threatening. I mean, it felt like another one of these could kill us, could really put our light out, not just financially because it's a low budget film, but just to the spirit of the film, which had been so strong up to that, it felt quite threatening. But happily, the second shutdown was quite short. It was only in comparison to the first one, which was 2 weeks, and that was what we talked about, the double-edged sword. It wasn't nice to be shut down and to reorganize, but it was a brilliant opportunity after a fast start for Brid, Clare, Peter, Sean, Damian, really to get into a clinch and nail down all questions about the characters. So when we did get up and running, that we felt real momentum. Then we were flying every day. We were flying through the material. And then the second shutdown, and I was like, oh wow, that sharp intake of breath, but no, we got turned around. We got the second shutdown turned around quickly, and we rushed to the end, and it was a fantastic. The last day was sensational, because not just because it was the last day, but it was an epic day. It was the day of the storm. It was the rain. It was the drama. It was that was all kept to the end of the production period. When we got to the end of that day, all exhausted, all kind of limping off home, it felt truly exhilarating. It was fantastic.
Yeah, well, I guess the biggest compliment I can pay is that you would not know that the film was shut down twice. It's beautifully made, and also I guess something else I wanted to ask about was the locations that are used. I believe was it down in Antrim that you shot at?
Yeah, it was around Strangford Lough. the various coastlines and the interlock on the outside, the east coast of the Arch Peninsula. So that was where we shot for sort of Donegal, an island off the Donegal coast. And yeah, I think Damian and all the guys have pulled that off beautifully, you know.
And I believe it was cinematographers on it were Damian Elliott and Angus Mitchell, who had captured some beautiful visuals. Can you tell me a little bit about working with them? Did you work with them in advance, and did you have an opportunity, as you did with the cast, to go through the aesthetic you wanted, and were you able to maximize being on the same page during these sort of stoppages as well?
Yeah, I mean, Damian Elliott was in from the start. We did a lot of prep on it. You know, when you've only got 18 days, you sort of have to shot list everything. You know, you just got to prep everything. There's no time kind of for figuring it out on the day. So we shot listed everything, and we discussed references. Usually, you know, looking at other thrillers, as I said, like, you know, there's some kind of solid thrillers that we would have looked at, things like Prisoners. I don't know if you've ever seen that.
Yeah.
Denis Villeneuve. And just we kind of worked off those references, and then because of the stoppages, we lost Damian, and then Angus came in, so he was kind of coming in halfway through it, you know. But I've known Angus a long time, and again, I had that shorthand already, so it was surprising that Damian and Angus are, you know, they're quite similar as well in their styles. And as the breakdown happened to be that Damian primarily shot the stuff inside the house, which makes up about 50% of the film, and then Angus shot the other 50%, just the way it fell. The two marry up very well. So yeah, that's how they worked out. Yeah.
Yeah, there's a particular scene that was sort of towards the end, whenever we find out, you know, we're watching Siobhan's perspective of events that happened after Peter's character leaves to go to the mainland. The sort of panning camera that's going around in a circle, I thought it was so brilliant. It was so nauseating as the build up of tension. Could you tell me just a little bit about that, where we're sort of just seeing, and your character Siobhan is coming in and out of the scenes at the perfect moments?
Yeah, I mean, it was something that I think Damian and I had devised at the time. It was this notion that you would hear Siobhan before you would see her, and then that would kind of ramp up the tension that you're hearing it before you see it. And it's such a cheap trick, because you literally put the camera on the tripod, and the cameraman just moves the tripod around on the head. But it works really, really effective. And I think there was a bit of time in Clare. I remember at the time it was just timing when you would leave and stuff like that, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was just literally like that. It's one of those things where we're so far into it at that point that the character stuff is all there, and to a certain degree, for a shot like that, you're servicing the director and the DOP. So you just pick up the baby at that moment, and you run in the door at that moment, and you know that if you do your job and they do their job, it'll look amazing. And it really does. I can never envisage. I'm not a visual person. I can never envisage these things until I see them, which is why it's such a lovely surprise to sit down and watch something after the fact. And that shot in particular really did work beautifully. And it's just me. Like, all I had to do was run in and out, pick up the child, don't drop the child. You know, like, it makes me look good, but I wasn't the one doing all the work, basically.
There's something nice about the real timeness, you know, because there's no cut in it as well. You can feel the intensity of the very little time that you have to pick up some stuff and get straight out of the house. And of course, you know, the beauty of the location in the house was that you've got those big windows to work with, and so that we were able to. It's actually VFX, a bit of a cheap, but the cars in you know, you can see the car driving off as it pans around to find Clare, you know. So to me, it just was a good way to ramp up the tension. And the music, the guys, the composer, score, draw music, who did the music for it, did an incredible job of just, you know, ramping it up gradually as the camera turns, you know. So, I mean, you know, it's funny, like shots like that, they're quite cheap to do, but they're very, very effective. So it's that thing again where if you've got 18 days, you do all your work in prep, and you kind of decide, you know, where you can best place the time and where you can best place the money to make effect, you know.
Yeah. And I would like to mention just, oh, sorry, was someone speaking there?
I was going to say that if there's a measure of, you know, how to be ready for, you know, I think it was, you can maybe correct me here, but it was almost the first shot on the first day with Clare, standing, looking out through the window, and she's just realized what the intent of her husband was. And, it's a big moment. It's a big moment for the audience, big moment for Clare, and that was her. Was that the first shot, Damian? Am I right there? It was
the first day. It was certainly the first day. I can't remember in the order of the day, but it was definitely the first day.
Very, very close to it. And I mean, that's a testament, to how ready, Clare and the others were for their performances. And that's, I suppose, because of everything we talked about, but because of, how they got the characters. And there was, that performance in that shot is note perfect.
And I want, Damian, I wonder, would you be able to, just for any sort of aspiring filmmakers or directors, having done your first features, or any sort of tips you'd like to share, anything of note?
I mean, it goes back to prep again, particularly if you've got very little time. It's about doing all the prep work beforehand. Shot list as much, if not everything, as possible, so that when you get there on the day, you're kind of, you're ready for it. And then, it's the old cliche, before I started, it was what everyone said to me was that your casting's 90% of your job. And you were always told it, but you can never understand it until you're standing there on the first day and you're watching the film happen and you're going, the actors are doing the vast majority of the work, so it's about finding the right people for the characters. And the one other thing I'd say is, the one thing I didn't know before I started was tone. Setting the tone is actually very, very difficult. It's, you're trying to work out what the film is, because it's not something you plan for and in just shots. You kind of got to discuss that with everyone. Everyone's got to be on that kind of uniformity of design, from the actors through the costumes. The whole thing's got to fall in line there. So that's actually one of the trickier things to figure out on a film.
Mm-hmm. And Aislinn, just on the script, obviously, as it's been discussed, they're like, Peter's character had duplicitous intentions, and we see that the tone completely changes on the script. Whenever you were writing it, how did you find it challenging to convey that across, the idea that these characters are, I know I've seen before discussions about having that consistency in your characters. Peter, you were discussing it before, I think during the Galway Q&A, about whenever you look back, that the character was always acting in the same way from the beginning of the film. How, as a writer, do you manage to convey something like that on script?
I think it's actually kind of tricky. I think it's the trickiest part of writing a script like that. And you're always having to kind of think on two levels, who he is now, who he's trying to present now, and what's actually going on underneath. So, and the same was true, actually, as was already pointed out, all of the characters are kind of working on a couple of different levels. Even Leisha is presenting a certain type of person because she knows that that's going to serve her in this moment. But it's tricky. It's a real balancing act, and probably the thing that you tinker with most across the course of writing a screenplay like that is making that work.
But it's also what's not said, isn't it? Because what Brid describes as island justice, and then the nature and the storm delivering the coup de grace. It's and that beautiful scene at the end where we go across the remaining characters who are all complicit. It's not in the words, it's in the...
Yeah, I think actually most of writing a screenplay is it's not the dialogue, it's what you don't put into the dialogue that's mostly important almost all of the time. It's characters are never actually or very rarely really saying what they actually mean. It's like people even in real life sort of talk around things a lot, or they say one thing but really they mean something else, and that's the craft of actually writing dialogue, is in figuring out how to do that. It's mostly what's not being said.
And I also would like to I was going to touch on it earlier, but whenever you mentioned score and sound, I thought that was that added so much tension and everything to whenever we see the perspective of Siobhan's character, and how at the beginning of the film is being perceived or being depicted as forgetful and zoned out, whereas that how does it feel whenever you see that in the edit and post-production, seeing that the idea coming together once you have that layer of sound and score on top of it to really drive home what Siobhan's character was internally feeling, I guess, in those closing scenes?
I mean, Dermot will speak to this as well, but it's, you know, one of the greatest moments I thought was going into the sound mix for the first time. And number one, you're hearing it on the speakers, you're hearing it in 5.1 surround and all that good stuff, but it adds so much to it that, you know, a lot of stuff that you couldn't have thought of, or you would never have imagined. Someone's added all these effects. And I've noticed it most, for example, again, this is a spoiler, I'm sorry, but in the fight scene, you know, what they were doing, they were adding in sounds of like grabbing clothes and things like that, you know, simple stuff, but the effect that it had was huge. You know, it'd be sitting there with your knuckles going white, you know, because of the sound of it, you know. And the same with the music. Dermot's worked a lot with the composer score draw music, and he set that up. And I mean, we a lot of fun doing that and playing with that. And I think it adds hugely to it. In fact, you know, seeing it on the big screen, that's one of the biggest notices that I've noticed is the sound design and is the music. That's what really kind of blows me away every time, you know.
Yeah,
I think it is the essential difference between cinema and TV drama, isn't it? You know, and I think the broadcasters have to be, admired for investing in these propositions. TG4 did quite a lot, you know. But, you know, if you take, for example, the scene the guys were talking about earlier, the 360 shot, you know, which TV drama wouldn't have the patience to hold on screen, you know, but the image, the camera work, the music, the drama, the choreographing that Clare talks about, Mick's had a truly cinematic moment. It's nothing little, you know, that's for the cinema. It'll work well on TV. TV doesn't work well in the cinema. Cinema works well on the TV. And you set your ambition, your stall out for the cinema, then you're going to make something proper.
And obviously, the film is out this Friday, and it's also played at Galway Film Plaza, as you guys touched upon before. It's played at Newport Beach, and I'm sure some more festivals to come as well. Can I just ask you guys, what was it like seeing it on the big screen, I guess, for the first time?
Well, I find it very profound, you know, again, because it's my first feature, maybe it's different for me, you know, to see something of that size. And, you know, we screened it here at the Belfast Film Festival, and the screen was huge, you know. It was kind of, I find it very profound, you know. And also the thing about the Irish language, I'm sure I've said this before, but, you know, I've spent a lifetime in dark rooms like that, you know, and to hear Irish come out of the speakers is, you know, it's a kind of pinch yourself moment, you know. I think that was maybe the fourth film ever I'd seen on the big screen in Irish. So as an Irish speaker, I just, you know, it kind of really, you know, you spend the whole time, you know, on shoot, getting things done, getting to the end of the day in the edit, you're trying to get through it all, and you're doing it piece by piece by piece. And then all of a sudden you're presented with it for the first time, you know, as an hour and a half piece. You're sitting there, you can't do anything about it by that stage. So you have this moment where you can only watch it as a viewer. And, you know, I found it very, very profound.
Does anyone else have anything to add to that of their own?
Sorry.
Go ahead, Aislinn.
For me, it was just like incredible, you know, because I wasn't there when the film was being shot and everything. So to see this thing that you've had in your head, sitting by yourself in a room, writing, you know, and building these pictures, to see how these people have come together and made it into this thing and put it onto this screen, it's phenomenal. It was so impressive, and particularly the performances were just astounding. And then as Damian says, the score, the sound design and the score were so good too. And I was just delighted with everything. It was an amazing experience for me.
It did feel like we were slaloming on our luck by the time we came to show it at the Belfast Film Festival, you know, because it was one of the three key films at the festival, you know, it and Belfast and Lyra, the documentary, and Lyra McKee. And, you know, was just before Omicron struck, and, so the cinemas were just opening up just before they started to shut down again, or at least come under pressure. So 400, whatever it was, 450 people sitting in the Odeon watching, this Irish language feature film made, in the north, as a key part of the Belfast Film Festival, which had coming home, bring it all back home kind of theme to it. Yeah, it felt just fantastic. It couldn't be better really for us.
Yeah, I second all those feelings. It was quite emotional as well, I have to say, when I watched it in Belfast, and I waited to watch it on the big screen first and to share the experience. And it's probably something I won't do again, because it kind of, you need to walk off by yourself and have a walk and a think and a chat after it. But ultimately, to get to see something that we invested so much into it, over the 6 weeks, and as the break, the lockdowns, and being away from family, and kind of coming together to say, let's finish this. We've got to do it. We put so much in. There's something special happening here. We were really enjoying the time as well. To then see it culminate into a beautiful piece of work that you'll be proud of till the day you die, and everything just came together perfectly. And the hard work that we put in, and even the having time to kind of work in the script during the lockdowns or whatever, helped us. But ultimately, it's just a sense of huge immense pride of something, and Oscuelga Choma, because I grew up speaking Irish as well, and you feel at the moment with some of the films, Arat and Fusca, and some of the films that are coming out, that there's a revolution happening within Irish film, and it's films that are being created with a very independent nature and how they're being made, but also in the vision that they have. And as was touched upon earlier by Aisling, and I think Damian said it in a few other interviews, is that this is a great film, and you don't come away from it thinking it was a great Irish language film. It was just come back thinking about the story itself, just that happens to be in Irish. And I think that just gives you such an enormous sense of pride in the work. And I think you rarely get a chance to do work that you come away as proud of sometimes, that it's so collaborative. It means more to you than just any film that you've done. It's a very special one, I think.
Yeah, and I think particularly after the difficulties that you guys came through against the background of the pandemic as well, I'm sure it was a bit of a double whammy in terms of the emotions of it all, But I think you do make a very important point, which is Irish language productions, hopefully it'll be across both film and television, but just with audiences becoming a lot more interested, particularly English speaking audiences becoming more interested in subtitled and non-English language film and TV, there does seem to be a real opportunity here for Irish productions to make a big impact in that world.
I have to say as well, I mean, it's down to the kind of courage of organizations like TG Cahir who are doing the Cine Cahir films, and also up here with the Irish Language Broadcast Fund and BBC Gaeilge. But it feels like whatever's being done, it's all coming out so well, and as Peter says, it does feel like a bit of a golden age at the minute with Finky, Arak, Foscu, Callian Cuan's about to come out. It feels like we're on a bit of a run, so even just the notion that an Irish language film is going to be released in the cinemas on Friday, and people are going to go see it, and they're maybe not going to even think about it being in Irish until afterwards. It's great.
Yeah. And is there just one of the last questions I have before I just go to one or two questions that we have in the audience here, which is what do you want audiences to take away, I guess, from Doineann?
It's for me, it's just that they're entertained and they're gripped by the story from the start to the end. Like they would go and watch any movie from Hollywood, say, and they just come out entertained. That's what I would want from it.
Perfect. And I have a question here from Robbie Walsh for Damian and Aisling, just about what were those films that you drew inspiration from when looking at the script?
I have to think back here, Aisling.
I don't know if it was so much that there were films. that we talked about in relation to this specific story. It was more, these are the kind of films we like, wasn't it? It was just, we found common ground with in the kind of thriller genre generally, and we discussed a whole bucket load of films that we like in that genre. I can't remember any specifics.
I do remember giving Damian Elliott, the DP, a list of films which were Prisoners and actually No Country for Old Men was in there, and Girl with the Dragon Tattoo, the Fincher version. And I remember at one stage he was just like, you know, are you joking? Why do you keep giving me Roger Deakins films? You know, it's we've only got 18 days here. And there's another film actually, Maureen Conlon from TG Car put me on that film called Beast. Have you seen Beast?
Oh yeah.
Yeah, and I thought it was, you know, really solid reference. So I think that was the thing. We just it was good, solid thrillers that had good twisty and turny plots, and that's what Aislinn delivered as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah, Moira Collins actually messaged in here twice. One of which she just said that TG Car is on Brody Loss on Scan Shock Code agus le Gachtin Evi Portagam Mashiv. And also just to say that Veronica Smith, who taught Brid Irish, that she is still alive and she's very much looking forward to seeing the film.
Hey.
And I guess I just have one other question here before we wrap up, just from Brian Harty, which was, he was asking, was the script tight, or was there any room for improvisation? And also to the actors, what is that something that you'd be willing to do or try? Oscar.
Sorry.
Sorry, Ashley.
I mean, for me as a writer, I write the story, but I'm always charmed when I want the actors, and it's not really my place to say because I'm the writer, Damian's the director, but I always love to see it when actors can fully inhabit a character and think, this is who she is, this is who he is, and feel inspired to improvise. So personally for me, I welcome that absolutely, but I'll let you take it from there, Clare. I interrupted you.
Oh, I write as well, and I just, whenever I get a script as good as Aislinn's, I think, I feel anyway, unless it's the nature of the set or the project that there is improvisation kind of encouraged, the script is that tight, and as well because the characters are there's so much tension involved, and as Aislinn said, her job, which that she did so beautifully, was all the things that weren't being said, particularly for Doineann, like that all the things weren't being said were so important, that how short the lines were, how sparse they were, I think was really important. So I felt like I would be doing her writing an injustice if I was to try and elaborate, or it was all there basically on the page. I wasn't going to make it any better by changing it.
Yeah, I agree with that. I mean, myself and Damian, I think the first time we spoke, that we both agreed that often when you're reading scripts, sometimes people are over-explained and sometimes the characters are overwritten. So sometimes your nature is to pare it back, take it away. And as Clare said, with these characters, they're so well drawn out, and the relationships, and what one person, what Mike Tomas wanted to say at a point, he just left enough to say to put people off the scent, so to speak. So if I put anything else in there, I'd be steering away from the character. It was so finely tuned. So for me, it didn't feel like one that would be improvised, but I think we spoke around various things, but it felt still at the same time, like by the time we got there, the words, because we had time to read them, and because we were working on our Irish, even though I'm a fluent Irish speaker, but I still had to go back and, fine tune some of my Irish. But it felt that by the time we got to this script, probably the time we got to shoot, the words seemed quite natural. And it felt like were already living in our head well before we got down to say them. So it felt like quite a natural experience in speaking the words by the time we did it. So it didn't feel, don't think it felt necessary to improvise, which is something I'd love to do and I've done before, but it needs to be worked out. Like you need to prep to improvise as well. I think that's a key component to improvisation. You need to work around it, as Brid will know. She's worked on some incredible improvised stuff over the years.
I like improvising, but there's no way I could have improvised in this because I just didn't have the language. you know, I couldn't, there's no way I could improvise in Irish because I was, you know, putting a lot into just getting the lines right in Irish. But, and again, I agree totally with Clare and Peter. There was no need for it because it's so well written. It really, it's all there. And the rest is listening. There was a lot of great listening to do in this film, which is also something that's very enjoyable to do in a film. Is actually, there's so much to listen to in the interaction between characters and the judging of the other character, the other character's motives. But the listening is good to do.
I think Gary's just joining us there. That's fantastic, guys. Thanks a million for chatting to me about the project. And I hope that anyone that hasn't seen it can look forward to seeing it. If they, I'm sure we haven't spoiled anything, but hopefully everyone that's watching has already watched it.
I'll just follow up on that and say I'm sure they have, and they're members tuning in for the voting season, but I'm sure they have friends who have not seen it, who should absolutely be encouraged to go to the cinema to see it on the big screen with the lovely 5.1 sound, as we were talking about previously. So I think it is important that anyone, you know, seeing this, or any of our members who see it next week when it's up, just please do, because we are in a golden age, I think, of something of a golden age of, or a new wave at least, of Irish language cinema. You know, there's been a lot of good ones in footsteps before, like back as far as Pusheen, and you know, a lot of great stuff TG Clarke put out, but like there is a real golden opportunity at the moment, and films like Doineann, which like I kept forgetting was an Irish, as you guys said as well, and it was better for being an Irish, but it was just a really, really great thriller. So I'd love people to see it in the cinema and for people to share and tell that as well. But for now, guys, I just want to say Mila Cordigas on the film, and thank you all so much for joining us. Damian, Peter, Brid, Clare, Aislinn, Dermot, and a big thank you to Nathan Griffin for hosting so well today. I really enjoyed all of you talking today. We'll be back tomorrow with another IFTA screen discussion, where we'll be talking to the team behind Redemption of a Rogue, and then back on Wednesday with Boys from County Hell. These are all terrifically titled films, I feel. But please do keep an eye on IFTA for more screen discussions like this. And just once again, a big thank you to the team behind Doineann, Damian, Aislinn, Dermot, and a wonderful cast, Peter, Brid, and Clare. Thank you very much.
Thanks.